I joined the Peace Corps almost 25 years ago, and when I was running the numbers last night, I realized that that was before most of you were born, which was pretty humbling to me. But when I joined the Peace Corps, the way it worked, I served in Niger, West Africa. The way it worked is they would put you in a training for about 3 months. Usually, it was either stateside or in-country. In our case, it was in-country in a village called Hamdalai. And for 3 months, they basically taught you the local language. In my case, it was Hausa, how to take care of yourself in some basic ways, how to plant some things, and the materials that was required to build a well. But they definitely did not give you a direction or manual on how to do your Peace Corps job. When they sent you out to your village, they did give you one book, and this is the book, Where There's No Doctor. Within a couple months of arriving in the village, I got the sickest I've ever been in my entire life. I went to bed one night, and I woke up in the morning, and I started vomiting this most extraordinary bright blue liquid, something I'd never seen before. And you have to remember, this is way before the internet, way before iPhones, way before Netflix, definitely before House of Cards. House of Cards, binge watchers? Yeah, me too. Valentine's weekend was House of Cards. So I couldn't Google blue vomit. But I could look it up in this book, and I did. And I quickly found out that it turned out that we treated our well water with iodine, and iodine mixed with carbohydrates turns blue. So I was sick, and the reason I was vomiting blue was because the iodine in the well water. But the reason I'm telling you this story is not because of the blue vomit. It's because of the way I felt the next day. I woke up, and I felt completely indestructible. I had survived and persevered and figured out a way to help myself in an environment that was super foreign to me. It was a time when I was at the very, very bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, when all you really want is your mom. And for me, what this meant is it really came down to 3 things, the gifts the Peace Corps gave me and that have really made me successful in life, and that is, grit, agility, and gratitude. My decision to join the Peace Corps was without question the very best decision I made in life, and it's because it gave me these 3 gifts that have made me very successful, or pretty successful at least. So let me start with grit. Grit, if you guys have seen this movie, True Grit, yeah, it's a pretty awesome movie. So what is grit? Grit is the ability to persevere, especially when you're facing strong headwinds to achieve long-term goals. Grit is not synonymous with hard work, and it's not even necessarily correlated with talent. Grit is something that recently Silicon Valley has fallen in love with, because grit is a signal that someone can persevere, and a person with a gritty mindset does not believe that failure is a permanent mindset. They actually believe, Silicon Valley believes, if you can get through failure, that actually even makes you grittier. It makes you an even more attractive person to hire. My story of grit starts with a well project in my village. When I arrived, this was the blue vomit incident. A couple weeks after I arrived in my village, there was a man, a chief of a village, who came to visit from, I think he lived about 10 kilometers away. And he literally arrived, and the roosters were just crowing, and he arrived with this huge bag full of, 40 or 50 eggs, which was a really, really big deal. Eggs were precious. So I knew he definitely wanted something. And what he wanted was a new well for his village. Where I was, the water table was 125 feet deep in the water. That's pretty deep. And where his village was, it was 200 feet deep, which means he really couldn't rely on a traditional well anymore. He really needed a concrete, modern well. So I was like, I can do this. I can get him a well. This is exactly why I'm in the Peace Corps. So the next day, I hopped on my Yamaha 125 motorcycle and headed out to the Bureau of Water and Forest and started researching what does it take to get a well in the village. And it turned out it was a pretty organized system. It was dependent on 2 things, how many people lived in the well and how deep the water table was. Well, those 2 things put this particular well right on the edge. They had about 200 people, and the water table was 200 feet deep. From the government's point of view, the people shouldn't be living in places where it was 200 feet deep. I sort of had a point of view, well, gosh, that means like 2/3 of Niger is where people should be living, and that's a hard message to take back to your village. So anyway, the way it worked is that countries sponsored wells. Different countries from around the world, the way that they provide development aid was by sponsoring wells. So I finally got them on the list, and sure enough, a couple weeks later, trucks started heading out to that village. And they headed out, and they headed out until they finally stopped. And when they stopped, the chief of the village came back and said, look, there's no more, there haven't been any trucks, what's going on? I headed back on my motorcycle to the Water and Forest Bureau and learned that the country that had been financing this well was Kuwait. And again, this was back in 1991, before you guys were born, but this was the first Gulf War. So everything got frozen. But I was assured that no, it would start again as soon as the war was over. Which I was like, I mean, this is already halfway through my Peace Corps service. But sure enough, the war did in fact end. And by the way, Niger sent troops to support the Allied forces, which was sort of an interesting tangent. And the trucks started heading back to this village until they once again stopped shortly. This was about 2 weeks before the end of my service, but I went back into Acquire, and in this case, the bank through which Kuwait, the London bank through which Kuwait was financing the well, there was illegal activity, and the bank basically shut down. This was a harder message to explain to the chief of the village, but I did, and he understood, and after I left service, I continued to write letters to make sure they did, in fact, get the well, which I understand what didn't finally happen. But the reason I'm telling you this story is not because of my grit, because honestly, I tried to persevere because I'm a type A person, tried to get them. The one thing I was trying to do for him when he asked me, within weeks of me arriving in the village, I hadn't actually completed by the time I left. But it was his grit and my fellow villagers' grit that really, really inspired me to continue to be gritty in my life. So let me now turn to the second thing, agility. So what is agility? I thought this was a great image because I think rock climbing really, really encapsulates the idea of agility. Agile people know what to do when they don't know what to do. So what does that mean? Let me just say that one more time. Learning agile people know what to do when they don't know what to do. They know the questions to ask, they know the people to work with, and they're comfortable in uncomfortable positions. So why does this matter so much right now? Well, it matters a lot. The Wall Street Journal recently wrote an article that predicted that in 5 years, there's going to be 160 new jobs that don't exist right now. So that means whatever you're learning in university right now, there's going to be 162 jobs that didn't exist that there's no way your courses could have prepared you for. I read another article that said that on average, my parents' generation on average had 1 to 2 jobs during their career. So they worked at IBM for 30 years. That you guys in this audience will have on average 11 different jobs in your career. So that means that you are, by definition, going to have to be learning Agile in order to succeed. It also matters because companies hire on agileness. Google recently did a study. Google's sort of famous for having these super, super high hiring standards. They used to only hire on certain GPAs and even SAT scores. Well, their head of people, their chief of people, their head of HR did a study, and they realized there was absolutely no correlation between high GPA and their highest performers. So they've completely stopped everything. They're trying to understand what is the correlation between grit and agile, or what are the proxies for grit and agile that can help them predict their most successful performers. There's no question that that Peace Corps pre-selects both gritty people and agile people, but there's also no question that once you've been through the Peace Corps, those two attributes will be very, very developed. Let me stop for a second and just tell you a little bit why this grit and agile attributes have helped me in my career. And by the way, my career has not been without many, many bumps and curves. When I got back from the Peace Corps, I was pretty cynical about development. I had thought I wanted a career in international development. That was one of the reasons I joined the Peace Corps. But I returned and I decided that wasn't for me. And I actually thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I worked at a law firm for a couple years and quickly realized that the law profession was not the right culture for me. And went back to graduate school and got a master's in public policy from Harvard, from the Kennedy School of Government. While I was there, I decided my dream job was working at the World Bank. So I pretty much spent my second year of the 2-year program doing everything I could to optimize my chances of getting this dream job. I did my master's thesis on microfinance, and that was before microfinance was a household name. And I co-organized a conference with Harvard Business School where we invited a bunch of speakers from the World Bank. So sure enough, I got this job at the World Bank. I took a job working in the private sector development department in privatization and microfinance. I literally thought I had just landed my dream job, and it wasn't. It was the worst job I've ever had. And by quite a margin, and I took the old Maya Angelou words of wisdom. I got off the train, and I left. And I took the proverbial train out to Silicon Valley and took a job literally as an executive assistant at an internet startup. You can imagine how well that went over with my parents. Master's from Harvard, 29 years old. I'm now working as a secretary. But this is when the learning agile things comes into play. In the 2.5 years I worked at this company called NetCentives, I think I had 3 or 4 different jobs. And the last one of which is I convinced them that we could sell our products to the nonprofit sector. And I led that effort, and it actually worked really, really well. So now it's August of 2001, and Yahoo was recruiting someone to run their entire community relations program. And back then, believe it or not, someone with technology, philanthropy, internet, and marketing experience was really unusual, and I happened to be at the intersection of those, and so Yahoo hired me. So remember what I said, that was August of 2001. Yahoo also at that point, the whole internet industry, this was at the end of the bubble, and many companies were going out of business, and Yahoo was about to lay off 500 people. But within 2 weeks of me starting my job, 9/11 happened. And when I woke up that morning, I was trying to figure out what to do when the whole world woke up to the tragedy. And I went into work, and my colleagues had already kind of gone into action. And for many people, believe it or not, the internet worked, but cell phones didn't. So we quickly provide information and resources. We also put Donate Now buttons on the front page of Yahoo. We raised $30 million in 2 weeks, which was a huge amount of money, especially given for many people it was the first time they'd ever made an online donation. I now work at LinkedIn, where I run what we call LinkedIn for Good. LinkedIn connects talent with opportunity to make a massive impact. And what I do for LinkedIn for Good is I take what we do as a business, connect talent with opportunity, and I pivot it towards the social sector. So what does that mean? Well, it's for you in the audience who may have LinkedIn profiles. We actually are now starting to serve to you skilled volunteer opportunities as well as nonprofit board positions. For nonprofits, what that means is you can now go onto LinkedIn, you can search for someone who speaks Mandarin, works at Microsoft, and served in the Peace Corps. Actually, I did a search to see how many GW alums served in the Peace Corps on LinkedIn. Any guesses? 840. Then I searched for someone who went to GW, served in the Peace Corps, and spoke Romanian. Guesses? There's just one. So it's I feel incredibly lucky to be able to take what I'm doing professionally to make an impact on the world. And I really, really do credit Peace Corps in helping me end up in this extraordinary professional position and be able to succeed. Nobody told me how to do my job at LinkedIn. I was hired into a position that didn't exist before. I've had to create it from scratch every step along the way. And I have enormous amounts of gratitude for Peace Corps for that. Which brings me to my last point, which is gratitude. Grit, agility, and gratitude. So what is gratitude? You all probably know what gratitude is. It's also become quite a popular term. Gratitude is the idea of being thankful for the world around you and wanting to give kindness back to it. Why does gratitude matter? Gratitude matters because lots of research shows that there's an enormous correlation between gratitude and happiness, as well as productivity and the ability to cope in difficult circumstances. I could spend literally the next 3 days talking about the ways in which Peace Corps has made me grateful and given me perspective. But for me, it really comes down to one thing. Toilet paper. So needless to say, toilet paper was a pretty precious asset in Niger. Certainly my villagers didn't have it, and it took quite a lot of focus to make sure you had enough supply. I was trying to think of a way to make you the equivalent of toilet paper to what you guys might think about today, and that is my obsession with making sure enough toilet paper is equivalent to you guys probably making sure you have enough iPhone battery left. Like you panic when it's down to like 8%, right? So I did. I went out of my way. And what this means is, and by the way, I'm still sort of strangely obsessed with it. Like when I'm at a restaurant and I see a roll of toilet paper in the public bathroom that's just loosely there, I tend to want to grab it and take it with me. Or even like I'll spend time at Safeway just walking up and down the aisles, staring wistfully at the rolls of toilet paper. And I'm being a little bit facetious with this, but it is kind of true. Like I don't take it for granted. And it's like a many times a daily reminder of this thing that we have that a lot of the world actually doesn't. So, and of all those three, the grit, agility, and gratitude, the gratitude piece is by far what I am most thankful for.
And my concluding remarks are basically, I can't recommend the Peace Corps enough. To anyone who's interested in a career of service. It will be valuable for you regardless of the path you take. But if I did scare you away with the toilet paper and blue vomit stories, I hope that those themes of grit, agility, and gratitude resonated with you, because regardless of the path that you take, those themes really, really will help you be successful and happy. Thank you so much.